In the previous video, these blocks were not around the scene. I added them in because it was difficult to have a perspective as where my player was in the game without them. These bits are not needed to continue forward, but if you would like to set up your level as well, feel free to pause the video and add your own decor in. Also, one thing I would like to do before we actually move on is whenever I move my player using WASD, you can see that it actually just goes left and right, forward and back, and it doesn't rotate. So I'm going to add in some rotation real quick. Let's begin by opening the moving script, and then I'm going to add a public float rotate speed. I'm going to set it to 150F to start. Now I'm going to go just above the offset here, and then I'm going to do transform.rotate new vector 3 0F, and then passing in the horizontal value times rotate speed times time dot delta time. And this should say rotate, not rotation. So let me just change that. There we go. And now I'm just going to move forward and back based on the transforms facing. So I'm going to take the horizontal here and set that to 0F. And we also have to inverse this or transform the direction to the transform rather than world space. And that's easily done by doing offset equals transform.transform direction. You can see here it transforms the direction from local space to world space. So we're just going to do that and then pass in offset and then save. And back in the editor, if I move around here, turning left and right, you can see it actually turns the character and forward and back again moves it forward and back in relation to which way it is looking. So now it feels more like a controller, and we'll be using this going forward. Now let's get started on showing names above our players. Go ahead and open up your player prefab. We're going to add a canvas and text for the name. With the player open, I'm going to right click UI and then add a canvas. And I'm going to change that from screen space overlay to world space. Next, I'm going to right click the canvas and then create an empty object and call it text. And then I'm going to add a component, text mesh pro text, and make sure you choose the one that says text, not text UI. So you want the one right here that says text. And whenever you add that on, you're probably going to get this pop-up window here, and then go ahead and click import TMP essentials. Now I'm going to align my canvas just to fix it real quick. You can see it's kind of off randomly in world space. So I'm going to set the X to 0, Y to 1, and then Z to 0. And I'm going to go back to the text. You can see it's a bit large. So I'm probably going to change this to 5 in width and 1 in height. And I'll likely just drag this up a tiny bit just so it's kind of above the player's head. I'm going to add in some text real quick just to make sure it looks right. You can see it's a bit big. So let's change the size from 36 to 12. I'm going to make it bold, centered on both the left and right alignment as well as the vertical. And I think that will be good for testing. Now I'm going to make a quick script to have the name look at the camera. So let's go to scripts, create, new script, and let's just call it look at camera and then open that script up. To keep things quick, we're just going to use the main camera. So get rid of the start method. I'm going to add private in front of the void update here. And then I'm going to do private camera underscore camera. And in update, I will do if camera equals null, then camera equals camera dot main. And just to make sure we don't have any null reference exceptions, I'm going to do another if camera is null check, then return, just in case the camera is not in the scene some reason. Now all we have to do is transform dot look at underscore camera dot transform. From experience, I know that this code is going to inverse the direction of the text and make it face the wrong way. So I'm going to go back to my player prefab, and first I am going to add the script to the canvas object that we added. So I'm going to drop look at camera onto it. Then I'm going to select the text game object, and then I'll just flip the rotation on it by 180. And although it looks backwards here in the preview, it will be the correct way in game. We now have the template for our text, but currently there is nothing to populate what's shown. Generally, the first way someone would go about showing a player name is by setting the text within a script on the player and then using a sync var to synchronize it to other players. We haven't covered sync vars yet, but they're used to automatically synchronize data from the server to clients. By using this technique, clients would always have the latest value. I'm actually going to use another feature that's similar, sync dictionary, which as the name suggests will synchronize a dictionary over the network. I already have a script called player name tracker, which is going to use our sync dictionary. If you want to follow along, go ahead and make your own script and then open it up. You can see it's already made. There's a bit of code here, not too much, but I wanted to type it out ahead of time to save some time in the video. Now let's go over what each thing will do. So the first is an event. It has the network connection and a string, and it's called onNameChange. As it says, this is called anytime a player changes their name, and this will be called on server and clients. There's nothing special about this event. It's a typical C# event, but we will be calling it later using network callbacks. Here is the sync dictionary, which will contain the player names for each connection. For the key, we will be using the network connection and the string as the value, which will be the name for that connection key. When making sync object, be sure to add the sync object attribute, make the field read-only, and initialize it. Below our sync dictionary is a singleton for this script. I prefer to avoid singletons in most cases, but to keep this simple, we'll be using one to allow easy access for this code. In Awake, I am setting the singleton value and subscribing to the callback on the sync dictionary. This callback will be received on server and clients every time the sync dictionary is changed. This is important to know when a player changes their name. In onStartServer, I subscribe to the server manager to know when a client disconnects. This is so I can clean the dictionary of any clients which are no longer in the game. As seen here, when I receive a connection state change for a client, I remove them from the dictionary if the status is not started, aka not connected. And of course, using onStopServer, I unsubscribe from the event. Going down a bit, we have the callback method for when the dictionary changes. Inside it, you can see that if an entry is being added or set, then the onNameChange event is invoked with a connection which is having their name modified. If you're familiar with syncVar hooks, this is the same thing except for dictionaries. Last, we have three very simple methods. The first is setName. The client attribute above it allows only clients to call this method. This is a method that the client will call to set their name. Once called, it will run a server RPC called server setName. Server RPCs are one way for clients to send messages to the server. In the server RPC attribute, I put require ownership equals false because no one is going to own the player name tracker, but I want clients to be able to use this. Once the RPC is called, the server will update the sync dictionary, setting the name for the connection. In result, this will synchronize the clients automatically, and when clients receive that value, the sync dictionary callback will occur, and this will invoke the onNameChanged event. I went ahead and made a player name tracker object in my scene and then added the player name tracker script to it. And since it does inherit from network behavior, you'll see that it should also add the network object component automatically. Before we add logic to setting our player name over the network, or rather calling the player name tracker, let's make a script to read current player names for players. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new script, and I'm going to call it name displayer, and I'm going to go ahead and open that script up. This is going to use some network callbacks, so I'm going to change mono behavior to network behavior, and then again using fishnetwork.object like we have in the past. And then I'm going to use override on start client. And in here, this is where we'll check the player's name and listen for any name changes. Before going forward, real quick though, I'm going to make a serialized field, private text mesh pro using TM Pro, and I'm going to call it underscore text. This is just going to be the text that we are going to update to the name. I added a simple method called setName. This will use the player name tracker to get the player name for the current owner of this object. If any reason the name is empty, it will be changed to unset. Once a name is gathered, the text field will be updated. By the time onStartClient is called, the owner will be known. With that said, I'm going to call setName within onStartClient. I'm also going to override onOwnershipClient. If the owner changed, then it makes sense that the name changed as well. Last, it's possible that the current owner may change their name during the middle of the game. Your game may not allow this, but for the sake of showing a full example, we're going to add support for this. This is where the onNameChanged event comes in, so let's subscribe to that now. Player name tracker.onNameChange plus equals tab to get the automatic method generated. I'm just going to take this method and paste it right down here. We also have to make sure that we unsubscribe when the client stops, so I'm going to do onStopClient player name tracker.onNameChange minus equals same method that we have below, player name tracker underscore onNameChange. Now this name change could be for any player, not necessarily the one on this object. So we're just going to do a real quick check. If arg1 does not equal base.owner, then return. Otherwise, if it is the owner of this object, then we'll call setName, which will update the name. With that script saved, I'm now going to go ahead and add it to our prefab. So I'm going to go into my player prefab. I suppose I'll probably drop it on the canvas. That makes the most sense. I added the name displayer script, and then I took the text component that will update under the canvas and then dragged it into the text field on name displayer. And just to show you that this is working, I'm going to hit play, start the client and server, and you can see that the name is now unset. This is because we have not added functionality to set player name yet, so it's defaulting to the unset value. You probably guessed, at this point we're going to make it so the client can set their name. Once again, to save time, I have already added the canvas which I'll be using to set my player name. In this example, I use TextMesh Pro input field. To add one of your own, right click in your hierarchy, UI, and then choose input field TextMesh Pro. This example is designed for using 1920 by 1080 resolution, so I changed the screen scaler to use scale with screen size and inputting my preferred resolution. If you would like to at this time, go ahead and pause the video to design your own input field. Moving forward, you can see I also added a script called NameSetterCanvas. Go ahead and make a new script called NameSetterCanvas and open it up. This is the script used to set the player's name, and as you see, it's pretty straightforward. I have a reference to the input field above. In Awake, I listen for submit on the input field, in other words, when the player presses enter. And when they do press enter, I take whatever text is in that input field and call playerNameTracker.setName. Now let's go ahead and take this for a spin. I'm going to open up the editor again, hit play, start client and server. Right now the name is unset. That is expected because there's no current name for the player. I will click the name field, type in hello, exclamation point, press enter, and you can see that it updated on the player. I now have the editor as server and two builds open, one which is a client which I've already set the name to my name. Now when I join in a second client, you can see that the my name object is set and the name is proper. And if I were to change that to, let's just say, a bunch of E's, you can see that that updates over the network as well. Just as such, if I change the name on this guy here, you can see that updates as well. Although the process seemed a bit long, most of the work was offline code and UI design. With a little network code, you now have names in your game.